What do these people need to get started? Why aren't they starting? We all know the answer is fear. But the difference with you guys or me or anybody who's followed through is we're more afraid of what life would be like if we don't follow through than the person who's willing to settle for what they got and kind of hope it'll change and maybe purchase something for the moment and then not follow through on it. It's almost like people, overachievers, have a little more fear. They're a little more afraid of missing out. They're afraid of not being there, or they got a strong enough reason to follow through. So I'd say if you're looking at home, you want to give somebody some value, go, where do I start? I'm sick of this. That's a damn good place. So, because guess what? What makes people excited is progress. You don't have to be at the goal yet to feel alive again. You have to make progress. And the first step to progress is making a decision and buying the product. But then they don't do the second step, which is open the damn thing up. For the point for your fear, and for some people, and I think in some cases, it's also a recognition of who I am and what I'm capable of. So for somebody whose life is already great, this is about, what if I could take on another skill that could create more freedom for my life? And just saying, I'm not having to go out and try and do it all perfectly right now. What I'm gonna do for the next 8 weeks, I'm gonna create a little ritual. I'm gonna do one thing a day to condition my mind, right? So that I get strong, so I follow through. I'm gonna read something, I'm gonna listen to something, I'm gonna immerse myself, I'm gonna go for an intense jog, or I'm gonna go lift weights, but I'm gonna do it consciously to get in a state where I'm gonna follow through. That's number one, because people follow through when they're in state. Second, I'm gonna get clear about why this is a must for me. Not because my back's against the wall, but because I wanna master an area of life that could create some freedom. I'm not gonna master it overnight, but I got the system, I got the plan. I'm gonna do one thing a day. I'm gonna work on one subject a week. This week's gonna be about figuring out what the right product or industry is. Next week's gonna be basics of building traffic. And each week I'm gonna make a little progress, and I'm gonna get to a goal, whatever that is. I'm gonna make $1,000, like $300 in a week. I'm gonna get to my $2,500. That first $2,500 is the most exciting. The first $300. I remember trying.
Life-changing too.
It is the most life-changing. I remember I was supposed to be a truck driver, making $24,000 a year because I'd be making the most anybody in my family had ever made.
How'd that work out for you?
Yeah, real well. Thank God I'm not driving a truck, right? So I figured out I could pull it with my finger now. I could do it with my teeth. I could pull it with my teeth, right? 36 grand a year was the goal. If I could make 3 grand in a month. When I did that, I was out of my mind. And then it was like, could I make 10 grand a month? Then it was 10 grand in a day, then 100 grand a day. Then could I make $1 million in a day? I had a day where I made $400 million in a day. The stock value of the company I took public, my personal stock. Of course. Because they told me when I was on stage, I had this audience of about 15,000 people at the Continental Center. It was during a stretch break. I was doing what I loved, rocking the house. Everybody's going crazy. And they go, your stock's worth $400 million right now. It's like, wow, that's cool. It's like, okay, I don't want to sound stupid. It's like, what's next? And I went right back to what I love. Once you break through, then it just becomes a game. The people that are getting your products have not yet broken through in most cases. The breakthrough happens by conditioning your mind every day, by feeding it a role model or story. It's putting yourself in a peak state when you follow through by getting physically strong. It's creating a little ritual of doing a little bit each day, and then you get momentum. The most important thing of all is what you start out with. Why?
Absolutely.
Why is it a must for you? It doesn't have to be you're against the wall, but it has to be something you're hungry for, because the only difference in people is hunger. And if you're not hungry, get around people that are hungry and something will hit you. You watch a conversation, you get around people that are doing better, and all of a sudden you start going, my life sucks. I remember I went to a guy in LA, one of the most multi-billionaire guys, I forget. And I lived in the Del Mar Castle, and I was really proud. That was like the symbol of me having taken myself and being poor, providing for my family in this great place. Built some castles in Europe overlooking the ocean not far from me. And I went to this guy's house, he was billionaire, he took me down to this wine cellar, and I was great guy. Went through this whole thing. At the end of the night, I was depressed. I lived in the Del Mar tenement, as far as I was concerned. I really was. I was like, I lived in a crappy place, and all my standards changed. All of a sudden, I wasn't willing to settle for living that. All of a sudden, my back was to the wall in a different way, because as a man, I knew I was capable of more. So people can change their standard by getting around what's better. People can change their standard by getting associated with what's true, like bills they gotta solve, the problems they gotta do it. or they can do it because they're excited because it's something new they want to take on. Everyone's different. But they got to find the why, and they got to come up with some daily rituals to get them going, and just do a step at a time. That's where you get momentum.
That is awesome.
So, think about what's the holy grail between somebody taking action or not. One word: certainty. When somebody is absolutely certain, the common word is believe, right? But you can believe at a general level, or you can believe with certain. When you're absolutely certain that if I do this, it's going to get that result, and that result's going to change my life, you'll do it. When you think it absolutely is not going to work, you're never going to do it. The middle no man's land of maybe it'll work, maybe it won't, that's the piece that kills people, right? So if it's a must for you, you got to make it work, right? In our case, right? That's an example. If it's not a must for you and you're not sure, you don't know what to do. So years ago, I'd look around and say, okay, how do people get themselves to follow through that haven't been following through? What's the difference? And I started interviewing hundreds of people, literally, and eventually thousands, because I had thousands of my events. So I'd ask the group to give me their feedback. And I came up with this model. It's like the holy grail of belief, or the holy grail of momentum. It's like the difference between what makes the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, right?
When I had nothing, I already knew I was driving like Ferraris and Porsches and stuff because I always wanted those cars. I already knew I was going to have them. It was inevitable.
Right.
I inevitably, that was just my inevitable outcome.
But how did you do that? Did you have a ritual? Did you think about it regularly? Was it one time you thought about it, or was it something you had an obsession towards?
I had an obsession towards it. I mean, I used to work at a video store, which is the last job I ever had in my life.
Thank God.
And I used to go to work almost every day, and I used to bring 2 magazines with me to read on my breaks. Entrepreneur magazine, just to read about business and everything else, and read about what other people are doing, look for role models. And I used to carry an auto trader with me. And I used to look at Porsches that were for sale. Yeah. And people always used to ask me, what are you doing with that Auto Trader magazine? I'm like, well, I'm just picking out the Porsche that I'm going to buy.
Right.
Which
probably got you a lot of crap.
I did. People made fun of me. Sure. I actually had a boss at that job tell me, you really shouldn't do that to yourself, John, because it's very, very likely that is never going to happen. It's very likely that you're never going to have that car.
Yeah.
That's the kind of belief he was trying to put in my head. And I was like, no, you don't realize that it's inevitable that I will drive here sometime in the near future with that car when I'm not working for you and drop movies off for you to put back on the shelf. And that actually happened. And it was one of the most fulfilling days of my entire life. And the great thing was when I pulled up in this car, I was in my mid-20s. Yeah. A car that most mid-20s.
What kind of car was it?
It was a Porsche 911 Turbo. It was a convertible and everything. It was a beautiful car. It was one I always dreamed of having. But for a few years I always circled the ads of which ones I was going to buy. When I finally got it and I pulled up at the store, I had all these people, some people that were still working at this $7 an hour job were there years after I left. And I'll never forget this, even the boss and stuff, and the reaction of people was like, wow, that is awesome. Is that your dad's car? And all I said to them was, not exactly. And I just smiled and just laughed. But it was, it's the weirdest thing, but I just knew it was going to happen.
But you knew it because
I conditioned myself to
you did it over and over again.
Yeah.
When I was in high school, I was not a popular kid, but I was passionate and intense, and I'll never forget. Some people, particular girls, gave me some crap on that guy too. And I wrote in their journals or their annual yearbook at the end, I wrote, someday, I said, you treated me like hell. Someday I'll be rich and famous, and you'll be an effing truck driver. And you'll be sitting there, I'll be with with this beautiful woman of my life, rich, and you'll be watching me on television thinking, you wish you would have treated me better. I actually wrote this shit in people's annuals because I went to a 10-year high school reunion when the people showed me this stuff,
great.
Right? But it's like, I burned the bridges, baby. I was like, this is how it's gonna be. So I'll give you a perfect example of this. They did studies, many have been done at this element, where they want to say, how much does the mind affect performance? So take basketball. I've worked with a lot of NBA players and turned them around. And one of the problems many of them have is they'll choke on the free throw line. Well, everybody knows in that case, if you normally shoot really well and now you're not, something's interfering, something's getting in front of your state, some uncertainty, right? Obviously. So they take a group and say, we're going to make them better. How do you make somebody better who's got this mental block? So they take a group of guys and they're going to do free throws, and they do one group where they just practice for 6 weeks. Totally intense practice, and I forget the number of free throws, but they got to do this many free throws every day. Take a second group, and they have them not practice at all. Obvious. and they take a third group and they don't let them touch a basketball. All they do is have them practice in their mind, but the key is, it's not practice makes perfect, it's perfect practice makes perfect, as corny as that sounds. So these guys see themselves making the shot every single time, conditioning their mind and body that it's perfect every time. They're not interrupted by a reality that would screw with them. So at the end of 6 weeks, they tally it up, and now they give them a test to see who has the highest free throw percentage of success. What do you guess it's going to be? Well, the obvious person says, obviously, it's not the guys that didn't practice. But which one is it? The mind, or is it the ones that actually practice?
Assuming the mind.
Yeah, you would assume it because it's true. You intuitively know the truth. That practicing is not enough. It's getting yourself so certain so many times that now when you go to do it, there's no hesitancy and you execute. It's having that absolute certainty that makes you tap your full potential, take massive action, get massive results, be reinforced in stronger belief. This is what makes somebody a star at anything. But anything you want to achieve, anything you want to learn, master, experience, there's somebody out there who has a life experience, the understanding, the network, the capital, the thing you need to be able to achieve it. But they're not going to give you what they want, or they're not going to give you what you want, rather, and need, until you first give them what they want and need. And you're not even going to find out what they want and need until you first get in a relationship of rapport. If you don't do that, you're never going to learn anything. Rapport is power. What is a relationship of rapport? Rapport means total responsiveness between people. When someone is totally responding to you, and you're totally responding to them, you're in rapport. There's that connection. It's that spark that happens in certain communications or relationships. Now, everybody wants to create rapport, have it, but most people only get rapport with people who are like whom? Themselves, and they lose with everybody else, which means you got a very limited world. When we feel like we have something in common with someone, there's a spark. Now, here's the problem. If rapport is created by feeling of commonality, most people try to get rapport by using words. But you've already learned something. What percentage of our communication skills are words? What percentage? 7%, which means you're leaving out 93% of your skills, which is why most people don't get rapport with a large number of people. See, words don't always work, do they? But there is something that always works to get rapport, and it's something called matching and mirroring. Matching and mirroring. Now, matching and mirroring came about 35 years ago when we've all done matching and mirroring our whole lives. But the person who pointed out was Milton Erickson. Dr. Erickson was a genius. What he did was he was a medical doctor, but he also was a psychologist and a hypnotherapist, probably the best that ever lived. And people would come to see him who try to change everything anywhere else in their life, nothing would work. They see him for one session, he'd handle it. And the reason is because he understood something. He understood that you have both a conscious mind and a subconscious mind. And he knew the subconscious is more powerful. It's the part that makes your heart beat 100,000 times a day without having to think about it. So he knew if he could influence your subconscious mind, he could change anything, and that's what he did. But here's how he did it. He had polio, so he was in a wheelchair. So he spent an enormous amount of time studying people. And he began to notice something about human beings, that when human beings got together, if they got in rapport, a relationship of responsiveness, they became like each other in a variety of ways. What he called, they mirrored each other. Now, I've taught this for 25 years, so I'm sure you've heard of it. I've written it in my books, and it's been taught in a variety of other areas now. But it's one thing to know it intellectually or to understand it. It's another thing to know it while you're doing it. That's what I want to get you to do tonight, so you have a real experience of it that you won't forget. But here's the basis of it. People like people who are like whom? Themselves. And people don't like people who are not like themselves. To be more specific, write this down. People like people who are like themselves or who are like how they would like to be. What is the single most powerful constraint as to whether or not your business is going to grow or not? What is it? Me, meaning the business owner, yourself. And if you're not the business owner, the biggest constraint that you have an impact on is yourself. And as you heard yesterday when we talked and looked at HomeX's example, here's a company that's growing leaps and bounds in a multi-billion-dollar business, traveling around the world. The economies are tearing apart in many places, and it's growing. But the constraint that they saw was the vision of the founder, what they were willing to believe is possible. And the great thing about them is, like, we didn't know. We didn't know it wasn't possible. That's a very helpful thing not to know, just to go out there and do it. How many of you, when you started out in business, didn't know what you couldn't do, and that was quite helpful? Let me see your hand. Say I. Me too. If I look back at stuff that I did back then, I think, my God, that's unbelievable. I can't believe I would say that or do that or try that. But what's interesting is in the beginning of your business, and when people are brand new at something, they'll try almost. But if you start to succeed, some of you are later in your life cycle. And so as you start to succeed now, you've got something to lose. And now you don't implement at the same level. You've got something to maintain. You've got something to hang on to. And so you have to be cautious about that. But besides your own vision, the limitations of your belief for vision, which hopefully have been expanded, how many feel like that has been expanded? If you shout it out here, say I. I know it has, I can see it. I've had the conversations with you. You know, each time you hear someone, you see a different perspective, a different way, and you go, my gosh, there's just so many ways to take my business to the next level. I don't have to wait. I don't have to hope for some, quote, good economy. The worst economy is my deepest friend because it's wiping out all my competitors and giving me an opportunity to take market share or become the leader or take their customers or buy them for a song. Selling has kind of an interesting connotation because in our culture, when we think of salespeople, we think of high integrity individuals who have a huge positive influence on the quality of our lives. Tell me the first words you associate to a salesperson, quick. Scumbag. Thank you, very nice, scumbag. What else? Manipulator, liar, greasy, deceptive. Guy goes, great guy. Now, how many of you in this room are salespeople? Let me see your hands. If you're an owner of a business, you better be raising your hand. If you are a parent, you better be raising your hand. Because by the way, are kids great salespeople, yes or no? I mean, you don't have to teach them how to deal with rejection. They just let it pass on by and keep coming, right? You can't have an ice cream cone, 10 minutes later they're licking on one with a smile on their face, right? No one taught them any scripts, no one taught them anything. What I want you to get is that the single most important skill in life, we hate the word selling, so I'll give you a word that it really is, that doesn't have the negative connotation. It's the word that all leaders have. What would that word be? Influence. What changes companies is leaders. The only way to change a company is leadership. If I want to change a company that I own and I want to make a shift in that company, the number one thing I'm going to do is shifting leadership. That might be taking leaders to a different level. That might bring new leaders in. That might be new leaders of new voices, with new perspectives, with new skill sets, new directions. But we need to take things to another level. Leaders solve problems and leaders maximize resources. If you're going to solve problems, you can't do it yourself or it would have already been solved. You have to get others to help you to do it. That requires influence. True? If you're going to get people to maximize resources, that requires influence. If you're going to get people to partner with you, provide you resources, capital, suppliers, anything, that requires influence. If you're going to have an impact on your kids or your community or the world, that requires influence. There is no more important skill of leadership than influence. And yet most of us think of it like selling, and as a result, we don't master influence. So I'm not here today to try and get you to become a master of influence in 45 minutes or so. Am I chatting with you here because we have so many of the speakers. This is the area of life I am most focused on. Because I know that if you can't influence, you can't lead. But if you can influence powerfully, intelligently, with integrity, there's no limit to whatever you can envision and what you can make real. And if your influence becomes not just you as the influence, but you're able to influence systems, people, company, culture. If you can turn other people into influencers, now whatever you vision about can be made into reality. And so as a skill of influence, we got to ask ourselves, how many agree leaders are what change companies? Raise your hand if you agree with that, say aye. And leaders' number one skill is influence. If you agree, say aye. But then the question becomes, how do you influence? How do you influence consistently with integrity? You can influence many ways. You can do it without integrity. But the good news is we live in a world today where whatever you do, it's transparent to the world because there are no secrets anymore, are there? Try to have a secret today, bless you. You can forget the secret. With the internet, with the culture we have, with the way the world is today, there are no more secrets, and whatever you think is still possible to keep a secret, give it 3 or 4 more years and it'll be impossible. Every phone call you make is recorded. There's no single phone call that goes in and out of North America that they don't have a recording of, and they can search by word, by tone, by tempo. They can even recognize voices now. There is no such thing as privacy. Everything you've ever put on the internet is there forever, and people know it and can search it. The way you write is searchable now. You can not sign your email, you can put it on somebody else's email, and the structure of your language and the way you influence things can be studied at this level. So the good news about that is manipulation as an ongoing tool for success is over. But adding value will never go out of style. Truth will never go out of style. So influencing with integrity is the secret. But what really influences people? Do facts and figures? We give you enough facts and figures out of a core story. Is that going to influence people? No. It's the weaving of that story together in a way that produces what shifts people. And that's human emotion. Ultimately, the big game here is emotion. You have to influence emotion. You have to influence the emotion of your people. If you're going to maximize resources, and if we all agree, as we talked about the other day, it's not a lack of resources, it's a lack of what? Resourcefulness. If you're creative enough, if you're playful enough, if you're determined enough, if you're focused enough, you can find a way. If you're giving enough, if you're generous enough, if you're honest enough, if you're courageous enough, you will get people to help you. You will find the way. You will make that thing happen. You'll access the resource. You get someone to coach you, teach you, loan it to you, let you try it, drive it, experience it. So it's the ability to influence emotion because that's what affects our intellect. That's the bottom line. A core story is only there to give you a set of facts to educate someone that will make them emotional enough to make a decision. And what they do is they go through a series of things that you have emotions about. They may say them in a non-emotional way, but the only reason they work is because you know they're going to open the person's emotion. How many agree with me on this? Say, So as leaders, we can never forget that humans are emotional creatures, including ourselves. And to influence other people, we have to know what already influences them. We can't ever forget what truly influences them. It's going to come down to our ability to connect with them at a deep emotional level or get others to do the same. Here's how I'd say it in a really simple term. To influence someone, you have to already be influenced. Right? To move somebody, you better be moved. To touch somebody, you can't touch somebody about your product or service or vision or idea or your company if you're not touched. To persuade others, you have to be persuaded. You can't give somebody else what you don't have. Now, you may have it intellectually, and here's the challenge. When you first meet somebody in your relationship, and you're all excited, what's the level of energy like? 0 to 10, make the sound of that energy. You meet somebody you're totally excited by, make the sound of it. 6 months, 6 years, 20 years later. It's scary, isn't it? And it's not time, because there are people I've been with them, been together 65 years, and they're still out of their mind for each other. They make the same amount of noise you did in the beginning here. What changes is, very often, when you're around something enough, I don't care what it is, there's a law called the law of familiarity. The law of familiarity says this: if you're around something enough, you take it just a little bit for granted. And it doesn't matter what it is, it's not that you don't care, it's that you get used to it. It's that the variety of it is not quite as high. It's not so new, and with that, sometimes you give it less significance. Even though in your heart you know it's significant, you don't keep the aliveness of it. It becomes something you intellectualize versus something you feel inside your body with a passion. So there are people say, but we love each other. Yeah, well, that's great. You know, hug each other every now and then. You say you love each other. A little kiss like that. Was that how it was in the beginning? No. It isn't time. It's that most people don't understand that this emotion, this intensity, this passion has to be constantly reinforced every single day. And like any muscle, if you don't use it, So then you have the base understanding why you do what you do, but you've lost the energy that makes it alive. And so if you're gonna be touching people, you gotta be touched. So then the question is, how do we influence ourselves? How do we influence other people? We gotta get them into their emotions. We gotta get ourselves into the emotions that are gonna move us to action. And we gotta do that ongoing, because otherwise all the stuff you wrote down will die. It'll die in your book, it'll die in your head. There has to be a level of emotion, a level of hunger in you that makes you go follow through. There's gotta be a level of energy in you that when you go share it with people, you're able to influence them to follow through. And when they don't do it, enough to get back in there with them again and get them to do it again. This is where the whole game gets won or lost. So what we gotta look at is, first of all, us. How many of you have days when you wake up and you feel like, I don't want to talk to people today? How many got days like this in your life? Say I. But again, as I said the other day, if you're the leader, you don't have that choice. If you're the leader, you have to get in a good state. If you're the leader, you have to get yourself in that place. And how many of you have had some gut checks? Let me see again in the last 6 months, 12 months in your business with economy changing like it's never changed before. How many have had those gut checks? Say I. So what do? We have to become masters of influence, which means we have to be able to master the state of our own organization. To master the state of our own organization, we've got to know how to change that. How fast, my friends? How fast? And where does it have to start? Ourselves, since we're the first constraint. And if we can do it with ourselves and influence, then we can teach everybody else to influence. We've said business is innovation and marketing. You have to influence people to innovate, because they're not going to just do it because they're used to what works and it's easier and they know it. Innovation means massive what? Change. How many people go, give me more massive change in my life with all the other things I'm trying to hang on to? They're not going to do that. You have to influence people to innovate. And marketing is influence. So, what influences us is our states. How do we change our states? Let's start with you and I and with anybody I'm going to work with. You've worked with me before, you know the first answer. If you're going to change somebody's state, the fastest way to do it is physical. Trying to change somebody's mind is really hard. Change their body, their mind will go. If you doubt it, give somebody enough alcohol and just see how quickly you can change them. True? Give them enough alcohol, I don't care who they are, they're going to change. What are you changing? Biochemistry, physiology. Physical body and the emotion, the mind will shift. That's why people take drugs. That's why people eat. When they go eat, it's a biochemical change in their body. So, but we can do this through movement, we can do this through change. So if you want to be the leader and you're going to be affected, first thing I'd say to all of you going home, so you don't feel overwhelmed, is you need to develop an ongoing discipline, because we are our rituals. And I mean a physical one. If you want to say, well, why is my life the way it is today? Look at your rituals. Whether you call them rituals or not, you have them. Most of you get up and you have a set of rituals. You go straight to email, or you go straight and work out, or you go have your breakfast, or you hit the snooze alarm at least 3 times. It's your ritual. Who knows what I'm talking about here? And if you want to know what somebody's like, you can see their rituals. If you want to transform your business, transform you by creating first, if you don't already have one, a set of physical rituals that you're not going to miss. I don't care if it's 3 days a week, 4 days a week, something's going to make you physically strong, because in a place where there's going to be a lot of fear, the way you deal with crisis is number one thing you should do is feed your mind. And you're doing that. Get yourself new answers, immerse yourself in new environments, get new voices, have new perspectives, ask some new questions. Isn't that what we've been doing here? You're going to start your morning with everybody. You're going to bring in and get some little audio clip of something from a movie or something that blasts across, the room. And have everybody stand at attention. You're going to do some crazy stuff if you're smart. Go over Zappos and see what they do. They got the most crazy stuff going on there. All the stuff that I do in seminars, they do every day at their location with their people. And people can't wait to get to work and they're in a certain state. So if I were you, I'd feed my mind, you're doing that. I'd then condition my body. Because your body is going to give you the strength to follow through. And there's nobody in this room can afford to do that. And I don't care if that's going for a walk. And as you're doing a walk, you're doing what I call my hour of power, or 15 minutes, to thrive, where you're just putting yourself in state, maybe doing incantations. You got to do something to get the blood moving through you on a consistent basis. And once in a while, it's really pushing you beyond your comfort zone. So when you get beyond your comfort zone in your mental side, there's already a reservoir there. Who knows what I'm talking about here? Say I. So feed your mind. Feed your mind with the information. Feed your mind with examples and the stories. Part of why it's here is good for you to see all these people that are succeeding. Go read some autobiographies, but feed your mind every day. Condition your body every day. And then the third thing is become a master of influence by asking the right questions. And that's what I want to talk to you about. Questions are the answer. You want new answers for your life? You need new questions. You're not getting through to somebody. The answer of getting through to them is not to talk more, it's to ask them more. It's to get underneath, it's to discover. Remember I said the other day, to influence another human being, you have to know what already what? Influences them. You can't do that by talking to them. If I tell you something, you can doubt it. But if you tell me, by me asking you a question, you tell me how it is, it's true. That's the basis of influence for those who are more sophisticated. Now, there are lots of ways to influence. You can tell stories and metaphors. You can influence by example. You can influence by rewards or by pain. But the fastest way to influence is to get inside of somebody by questions. Questions are the answer. Right? Our experiences, we don't experience life, we experience our association to whatever we're stimulated by. So if I said to you, I want to tell you a story about my senior year in high school. And I start telling you about my senior year in high school, and there was this girl that I was so in love with. Now, by the way, I can go on and on and on, but you're not experiencing my story. You're experiencing your story. You went back to high school as soon as I start to tell it. And you're experiencing somebody you were interested in. Very quickly, you're going for a reference point you can relate to. How many see what I'm talking about here? If I want you to think about your mother, all I gotta do is talk about mine. Because the only way you understand things is by referencing it. So questions cause you to go inside and reference things. Everybody has a need for variety. We all have a need to feel like there's a surprise in our life. Who here loves surprises? Raise your hand, say I. You like the surprises you want. The surprises you don't want, you call problems. Isn't it true? But you need those too to feel alive. See, you like surprises that you're certain, you're not sure they're gonna happen, but if they do, you're certain it'll feel good. Isn't it true? So people have a need for certainty, they need uncertainty, they need variety, they need stimulation. People have a need to feel significant, to feel unique, to feel special, to feel important. If you help people meet that need, trust me, the world is yours. I remember many years ago, Steve Wynn is a good friend of mine, and I love him. He's one of the most brilliant people I know. He's not only a genius entrepreneur, but he is an artist. He's one of the most creative people. Steve could talk about this lectern, and he could make it the most magnificent lectern you could possibly imagine. Tony, look at the metal on this. And he can just describe things in a way that are just unbelievable. So we were having dinner the very first time we ever met. It was New Year's one year, and fireworks were going off, and he and I were like totally into it. And we were talking about influence, that this is the ultimate skill in life of any business owner, and that's his only job is influence. He creates things, he loves that, but I can create all this. Guess how valuable this is if I can't influence you that it's valuable for you? Zero. It dies. It stays in my house. So we're describing this, and I'm describing these 6 human needs, certainty and uncertainty. And when I got to significance, he lit up like a Christmas tree. He goes, Tony, if you want to make billions, if you want to make billions of dollars, that's the one to give people. If you get them to link buying your product, makes them more significant, they'll spend any amount of money doing it. He said, think about it. People get these little handbags. What do you mean by these handbags? And he said, they cost nothing to make. They pay thousands of dollars because it's got somebody's initials on it. It's not even made better. I can show you one that's made better that costs 1/100th of the price, 1/10th of the price. When he built the Win and then the Encore, $2.7 billion for a hotel. But guess what? When everybody else is freaking out, you go over to the Win right now, it's full. Because the people that want to be known as the best have got to go to the best place. That's the need structure you want to meet. 4th need, connection and love. Everybody needs connection, everybody needs love. In fact, all we want that significance for is if we think if we're significant enough, people will love us. If I'm worth it, if I'm enough, if I'm beautiful enough, strong enough, smart enough, rich enough, intelligent enough, playful enough, funny enough, something enough, then I'll be loved. So if you're going to influence somebody, you got to know what's influencing in them is the need for certainty. And when you talk about change, you just mess with that. True? There's a need for uncertainty, but you got to show them how it's positive uncertainty, a variety. They need to feel significant, and gosh, what if you bring this new thing into change and it doesn't work out as well for me? I feel stupid, I look like I failed, I feel insignificant. Love? Gosh, I don't know if I'll even love myself if this doesn't go well. How many follow the pattern of what people get concerned about, right? So these first 4 needs, everybody finds a way to meet, even if they have to blame somebody else, or work really hard, or make up a story in their head. Everybody finds a way to be certain. Everybody finds a way to have varieties. Everybody has a way to be significant. Everybody has a way to feel at least connected, if not loved. But ultimately, the final 2 needs is everyone has to grow. Remember we talked about this first day? Progress equals happiness. If you grow, you feel alive. If you don't grow, you feel like you're dying. And so to influence people have this need for growth. And if they feel like they're growing with you, remember I said you can use fear to motivate them? That'll work for a while. You can use incentives. That'll work for a long time too, but there is a limit to incentives. The only thing that makes people feel fully alive long term is they feel happy because they're growing, they're expanding. Remember when Tony talked about how they took the same process of becoming a buyer for Zappos, but they broke it into more steps? Still 2 years, but you were a buyer level A, buyer qualified level B, level C, and people are like, yes, I made it. Progress, growth. And finally, what's the last need? Contribution. And you heard him and many others talk about, and you've seen the people here that are most successful feel like what they're doing has a meaning beyond themselves. Now, I'm reminding you of these 6 needs very quickly here because if you and I are going to influence other people, we have to know what already influences them. And of those 6 needs, who has all 6 of these needs? Who would you say? Everybody. Who here has a need to be loved at some level, whether you admit it or at least connected? Say I. Who here needs to feel unique, special, important, significant? Raise your hand, say I. Including the people who go, I don't need to be special. No, I don't need that. I'm a Christian. Or I'm a Jew. Or I'm a Muslim. Or I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. They find a way to be unique. Everybody needs this. It's human nature. So we need all these needs to be met, but we don't need them all equally. We've learned to value some of these 6 more than others. Some value certainty more than anything else. And so they live their life trying to meet that need. And if you try to convince them how exciting this new project's going to be, you just messed up totally. What you got to tell them is, you know what, if we don't change this, do you realize what's going to happen? Do you think that what we have right now is certain and solid? Do you not understand this is evaporating between us? If you and I are going to have any certainty at all, this is what we must do immediately. And they're like, let's make it happen. Right? If you go to somebody who's more variety driven, some people, the top of their list, they all want certainty, they all want uncertainty, we all want them all. We tend to have 2 that we value more than any others. Those 2 are the driving force in a person. So if somebody's variety driven and you go, okay, we're going to keep doing these same things because we got to keep fundamentally doing these elements, and the changes we're making, they're not that big because you're trying to convince people so that they won't be too fearful, you lost that person. You got to pull them aside and say, look, you and I got to understand something here. This is an entirely new game we're about to begin. I did this with my daughter, I'll never forget. My daughter Jolie always wanted to be a dancer on Broadway. And she was very talented. Of course, I'm her father, right? So, of course she's talented, right? But at one point, she's going to college and doing really well. She was based in Los Angeles. And she was winning all these dance competitions. And she came home for Christmas. And we're sitting down, and I said to her this question. I said, honey, how are you doing on your dream? And she said, what do you mean? She goes, I'm doing great in school. I got straight A's and I'm going to dance classes. I said, I know, but I want to know how are you doing on your dream? I didn't tell her how she was doing on her dream. You follow the difference here? I could say, Jolie, I'm concerned. You got straight A's in school and you're doing great dance classes, but you're not focusing on your dream, or I don't think your dream's coming about. If I start out with that, it wouldn't work. I got to ask. I got to make her break her own what? Break her what? Pattern. She goes, well, what do you mean? I said, your dream, you know what it is. What is it? Well, she goes, well, of course, the dance on Broadway. I said, uh-huh. And what are you doing? She goes, well, I'm going to school. I got straight A's and I'm dancing. I said, are you dancing against people you're better than or people that are better than you? What do you think her answer was? I'm better than them. I said, of course, because you're winning every time. That's a clue. So my question is, how do you get better playing against people you're better than? If you go out on a tennis court and you play against somebody that's twice as good as you are, even if you're a lousy tennis player, are you going to get better or worse playing against them as time goes by? Which one? You have to, just to stay on the court. If you sit across from somebody whose skill set is lower than yours, even though you want to practice as hard as you can, what's going to happen to your game eventually? It's going to go down. And you can just watch her process this. Now, if I said to her, you need to leave California, move to New York, and compete with other people, that probably wouldn't work too well. But I started out with, how you doing on your dream? And then I got her to say, what is your dream really? And I knew what the answer was. By the way, the best way to influence people, if you're trying to serve them, is you better know what you want to take them towards. As a leader, I got to know where I'm going to take you. That's my job. If you're a parent and you're not leading, your kid's leading you, you're not much of a parent. That doesn't mean your kids can't inform you, but there are points in life where you got to be able to lead them. And you can lead anyone wherever you want as long as you know where the outcome is and you ask the right questions. I could take a deck of cards, have you take out any card, see what the card is, and I can lead you that card. You take out, for example, the Ace of Hearts, the King of Hearts. And I say to you, well, let me ask you a question. A deck of cards has 52 cards in it. They're broken up into 4 different suits, aren't they? What are they? What are they? Come on. Yeah. So as you think of those, pick one. Cards. And some of you won't pick cards, so I'll say, pick another one. And if you already go down, if you ask everything, I'll say, and that leaves until we finally get to hearts. Right? And then I'll say, of those hearts, there's one that's valued more than the other one. What one is it? I mean, I can lead you wherever I want. I'm going to get you to say the King of Hearts or the A. I'm going to take you wherever I want to go. The question is, but I better know first. So I say to her, by competing with these people who you're better than, because you told me you're better than, so I'm not saying it, she's saying it, how are you going to get better? What happens in these moments? She's making new connections in her head, new nuances, new beliefs. And she says, well, no, I'm not. I said, let me ask you another question. What's the life cycle on a dancer? I mean, can you be a dancer when you're 40, start when you're 40, 35, make it on Broadway? She goes, no. I said, how old are you? She goes, what do you mean? You know who I am. I said, oh, just how old are you now? She goes, well, I'm 21. I said, when would now be a good time for you to start? Now? Oh, yeah, it's a good idea. She said, what do you mean? And I said, honey, everything I've done in my life has been based on modeling, but also there's something in me that most people don't realize has really made me successful, and that's a sense of urgency. I do not settle. I do not wait. You wait and it's over. If you allow something to distract you, and I said, it's called utilization. By the way, I will tell you this inside. One of the greatest skills in your life as an influencer is, I call utilization, which is whatever happens, use it. That's the greatest gift you can give yourself in business and life. Whatever happens, use it. If you're aware that whatever happens is always an asset to your outcome, if you have the belief it's always an asset, I just need to know how to use it, then everything in life plays to you. It might be another metaphor, what Tony from Zappos talked about when he had those people take the test, say, am I lucky, extremely lucky to unlucky? Remember that? And ironically, the people that think they're extremely lucky have a different life. They have a different life because they utilize everything. They see everything as to their advantage. Anyway, with my daughter, basically what I said to her was, honey, I want you to get, you think I'm a genius. And I said, and I am. But I said, my deepest genius is urgency. I am one hungry mofo. I will not let an opportunity pass me by. I will not see something that's possible and go, well, I'll try that later. I grab it. I grab it right then by the hair. I crush it. I go after it. It isn't just talent. You know, how many talented people do you know who have unbelievable talent, but they never lived their dream? How many people you know that are brilliant and are depressed? How many people you know that have up-to degrees in education but can't fight their way out of a paper bag? If I stay on this path, it's not going to happen. There's not enough time. I'm 21 years old. I said, well, honey, how have I ever succeeded? What have you seen me do? What is the secret to me compressing decades in a day? She goes, modeling. I said, that's right. I find the best in the best. I won't settle until I find the very best. Not somebody good, somebody who's the very best. And I go figure out everything they do so I can compress decades into days. You need to go model or work with the best person in your industry in the world who happens to be in New York. And you need to train with them. And it's not enough to model somebody, you gotta take massive what, my friends? Massive what? You can come here and model the people here, but if you don't do anything with it, it's over, it's not gonna happen. So I said, you gotta take massive action. She says, well, what are you proposing? I say, leave school, move to New York, go into training. I will pay for the training as long as you have a full-time job paying for your housing. Because I want you to be a working actress, and as long as you're going on auditions. You can't just go train and work. You have to find a way for auditions too. You do that, I'll pay for you to be able to go there, I'll pay for your training, you pay for your housing. So that's really scary, that's a lot. That's a lot. When would I do this? She goes, I'm in the middle of school. I said, when would now be a good time? She goes, you mean like right now? I said, what do you think? She says, in the middle of school year? I said, yes. She said, but you're the one who told me to go to college. I said, I was wrong. I said I wasn't wrong about college. I'm glad you're going to college. You got straight A's, and you can go back and do that later. You're not going to run out of time to go to college. You're not going to lose any of your credits. But you're running out of time to become a dancer. I said, I don't know if you're that skilled. I think you're gifted, but I'm your father. Of course I think you're gifted. You could be ugly, I still think you're beautiful. Right? So I said, the only way we're gonna know is if you get in it. Because I said, there's one emotion I don't ever want you to have in your life, my girl, and that's regret. That's an emotion I don't want you to ever have. That's up to you. But if I can help you from not having it, that's what I'm talking to you right now. And if you don't take this shot now, you tell me what level of regret you might have later in life. said to me, do you mind if I ask anybody else their opinion? Who are you thinking of? And she said, no, Dad. She goes, of course I respect your opinion, but you've always taught me to go to the area where there's the greatest expert. She said, the greatest experts are people in the business. I said, you're right. Who are you thinking of? And she said, well, I was thinking of so-and-so, this gentleman who's at CAA, who was a good friend of mine, and she knew him. He's one of the top guys at CAA. I said, he's actually a brilliant idea. I said, that's smart of you to do that. Check it out. She goes, okay, I will. I said, when? She said, now would be a good time. Now would be a good time. So she literally went in the other room, and as she goes to the other room, he's one of my friends. I call him right then and there while she's doing a true story. I said, look, I just talked to Jolie. I only have 30 seconds. Talk to Jolie. Here's the deal. You know this. She's here, straight A's, da-da-da. I said, I told her she should go to New York because that's where dancing is, and she needs to be in proximity, doesn't she? Proximity is power. I just told her you're absolutely right. I said, if it's not right, tell her it's not right. Is it right? It's right. Tell her that. Bye. No exaggeration. She walks in 3 minutes later and says, the line's busy. I left a voicemail. So I said, honey, don't leave a voicemail. Call back again. You know him. He's on the line all the time. She always calls me. Long story short and true story, she talks on the phone. He talks to her for like an hour and a half. She comes back a couple hours later. God, Dad, I had the greatest conversation. It was the right thing to do. And he says it's absolutely right. And we talked about why and how and all those things. And so I said, okay, great. I said, you can't be a, prophet in your own land, I guess, around here. I took my little sunshine girl who was used to living in Southern California and going to the beach, right? I took her to New York during one of the worst winters New York had had in like 15 years and put her in this crappy little apartment deliberately because I wanted her to be hungry, right? And sure enough, she went and she trained with some unbelievable people and she kept going on these things. And less than 6 months later, she called me up at one time and she said, Dad, she goes, I have a little surprise for you. When you coming to New York? And I told her, and she said, okay, well, I want to pick you up from the airport. Sure enough, I get to the airport. She's not there, but there's a car there for me. A little note. I said, Dad, I just have a little surprise. And so I'm okay. So I get in the car, and I'm excited to see my daughter. And the car drives by her apartment, and we go down to downtown Broadway. We pull up in front of a place, and there's a play called Tommy, if you remember that classic play, right? And on the headlines, I see my daughter's name. Within 6 months, she was on Broadway. The whole thing happened just from that process. You must lead your children, you must lead yourself, you must lead your business, which means you can lay down law, foundation, principles, distinctions, you can tell stories, you can give examples, but ultimately you must ask for the order. You must ask for the action. And you must ask in a way where they're already convinced because they know what's right inside of them, not because of the power of your personality. Because the power of your personality will go away. But see, when I went away, she already owned all this. How many follow the difference here? Say I. Plus, you'll learn a lot. You'll learn. You'll find out, I'm trying to influence this, something may not be right. Maybe the better thing is some mixture between what I thought and they thought. You'll find that by asking questions. You can't just ask questions where you're only trying to get to the outcome. You got to have the overall outcome, and you got to be open to what's happening as feedback along the way. And you got to know what people need. Certainty, variety, significance, connection and love, growth, contribution. And you got to know which one of those they value most to get their attention. You got to start with what they value, not what you value. See, most people think influencing someone is getting them to do something. Well, if I said to somebody here, okay, I'll give $1 million to the first person up here who's naked within the next 15 seconds, trust me, that's not influence. Any idiot can pull that off. That's a bribe. And that's what some of you do with the people you manage. You try to bribe them, and you go, look how well they're doing for a while until that gets old. Until being naked gets old or $1 million gets old. $1 million gets old. Who knows what I'm talking about here? Yeah, some of you sure know, $1 million isn't squat. Whatever you're around, you get familiar with, it loses its intangible quality. So you got to be constantly thinking this game about how to meet these people's needs. You got to use questions to do it. Who else do you got to ask quality questions of, my friends? Who? ourselves. If you want to get yourself in state every day, what are you going to do? Feed your mind? What are you going to do? Condition your body? What are you going to do? Ask better. Not, how am I going to survive this economic downturn? That kind of question, you're going to feel like hell and you're going to do like hell. Because that's going to put you in a state where you're not going to come up with any answers. So what are some of those questions? Well, in my own life, I learned to ask questions that were very helpful to me. I learned just to go, instead of saying, I'll give you an example. I remember I was on the road. I'd been 120 days in a row on the road. 100 of those days I'd been on a stage. My voice was gone. My body was gone. Because most of the things I do are not like this, where it's you guys are sitting in chairs and it's casual and you're talking for a few hours. There's a 50-hour day, weekends, bam, 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 and then the full time in between, the flying 12 hours. Crazy. And I got home, and I was burnt out. I was physically burnt out. And I got home, and the first day I was home, I had 100 and something phone calls. Now, this is obviously the days before email, because I thought 100 phone calls was really just horrific. Right? I was like, 100 phone calls, and these are the questions I asked myself. I was like, what the hell is the matter with my life? How did I end up in this pit? By the way, I was living in a 10,000 square foot castle overlooking the ocean in Del Mar, California, while I was saying this to myself. But can you hypnotize yourself with questions, yes or no? Questions have presuppositions, like the man who came the other day and said, well, how can I do this when it's impossible? That's basically what he said to me. He said, how can I double my business when, no one is buying anything anymore? Well, if you ask a question built with a negative presupposition, you're in pain. You have to have better questions. So I said to him, is there any other person you could sell to? Is there any other service you could create? Is there any other market that exists in the world? You get new answers when you ask new, but we ask the same questions over and over again. So I'm going, why did this happen to me? And why these people, why do I have to respond to all these people? But then what I did is I realized to change my state. I went and drank some water, I was dehydrated, shook my body out, said, what I'm gonna do first? I'm gonna just go for a little run, went for the run, got my body changed, and the state changed. New focus came with new questions. I started thinking, you know what? I would have died to have some of these people call me, 4 or 5 years ago. One was the President of the United States on that list. Another was a guy who's now one of my dearest friends that I remember I used to be a fan of this man. He's just a genius of a man. And now he's one of my best friends. And so I asked myself, how did I get so lucky to get these people in my life? How did I get so lucky to have 100 people want to talk to me in a day? There was a time I can remember in a 400 square foot bachelor apartment in Venice, California, when I heard the song I Am, I Said, and no one heard, not even the chair. And I sat there with tears thinking my life had no meaning and I mattered to nothing and no one. Sometimes it's good to ask a question that reminds you that whatever you think is stressful today was something you would have dreamed about at one time in your life. To have a foreground, you need a background. Sometimes it's useful to remember your background. So I asked myself, okay, why do I want to call these people back? Is there a presupposition there, yes or no? What would be great about calling these people back? Well, I said, actually, I want to catch up with Peter. And pretty soon, instead of having to do it, does the state you do something in affect the people you deal with, yes or no? And your state is affected by what you focus on. And what you focus on is controlled by questions. So then I thought, a better question. I said, how can I make all of these phone calls and enjoy the process? Because for me, it meant sitting down, being all crunched up, going there, talking, not breathing, not eating, not anything, 100 calls, right? And I looked out the window as I saw that outside. It was a sunny, beautiful day, and there was sitting my swimming pool and jacuzzi overlooking the ocean. I said, I'm calling everybody from the jacuzzi. Because I asked a better question. How could I make these calls and totally enjoy the process? I didn't get the answer. So if you keep asking, that's the secret. Ask and you shall. But you got to ask consistently, and you got to ask in a state of certainty. Not like, well, what do I do? That's not going to do. I said, how can I make this call and enjoy it? I went, I'm going to call from the freaking jacuzzi overlooking the ocean. If I wasn't making the calls, that's where I'd be. So why wait? So I took my little list down. I got not my cell phone, but my little extender phone out, right? And I sat in that swimming pool and talked and laughed. And I remember when I was calling everybody, and before I called them, I thought about all the things that we'd done together or what was cool I wanted to share with them. And I made all the calls. I didn't reach everybody who was reachable, but I made all the calls I could possibly make. And I was in that jacuzzi for about 3 hours, and they came out like I looked like I was 4,000 years old. But I was so relaxed, And I had the best time, and all the calls got made just because I asked a better what? You want to influence somebody? Ask a better question. That's the whole game. If you have a problem, people tell me all the time, I have a problem with that. And I say, what's your question? Because all you're saying when you have a problem is there's a question that you have that's not been answered. Problems are really questions that have not been answered. But when you state them not as a question, you forget that you're after an answer.